we don't talk about whiteness and power. And when we talk about race here in the United States, we identify Hispanics. You all are part of them. You're minority status. Like Gigi, you're Puerto Rican, right? You look white, but you're considered in the United States to be a minority in the US, right? So however you want to define yourself, if the moment you say you're from Puerto Rico, that puts you in a different category. So for everybody, Luciana, same thing. Mina, same thing. Like as someone who's half Indian, like that doesn't, like in the world of minoritized world here in the US, like when we think about power and minority status, if you say you're half Indian, Indians haven't like risen to that level of being an oppressed group in the United States. But Panamanians are, because we identify Panamanians as part of Latin America and as part of a group that's been oppressed in some way, right? This is what, when we ask Latinos, when we ask Hispanics, how do you identify? 42% of all Hispanics in the US identify as white, 34% mestizo or mulatto. And mulatto means black and white, and mestizo means, usually it means indigenous or Indian. So like Rafael, right? You would be mestizo. If so many Hispanics are identifying as white, right? Why don't we talk about the complexity of the issues, right? It's like, if you're Hispanic, there's a certain minority status that you get being Hispanic. I mean, there are any number of things, right? But we all know all sorts of programs that we have, and yet so many. So in Hispanics are part of this status of people that would be brought into those programs. And yet so many Hispanics identify as white. Like, how are you minorities if you're white? Like those of you who are, or Hispanics that are white. So the issue is Hispanics in the United States are a minority. In a minority in terms of power. 18% of the United States identifies as Hispanic, right? It's the largest group, ancestry group in the United States, right? But people who are Hispanic are seen as having they're part of the minoritized, as seen as having minoritized status, underrepresented students, underrepresented people with less power, people with less privilege, people who are oppressed. We use this word in the United States, especially right now with Black Lives Matter. It's like Black people oppression, right? People are throwing the oppression word around. So we take that as well with Hispanics and Latinos and be like Native Americans oppressed, minorities oppressed, Hispanics, Latinos oppressed. And yet 40% of Hispanics and Latinos in the United States identify as white, but yet they still have this sort of ability to hold this oppressed status somehow, right? Because it's a minoritized group. How do you handle that? How do you deal with that?
I think a lot of it has to do with sometimes it's just I know this is it sounds really strong, but it is what it is. Sometimes it's just self-hate too. A lot of the times you'd be surprised from my own family how many times I've seen or experienced people who are even if you're Puerto Rican and you look like Gigi, lighter skin, fair, you're still gonna have a small amount of Indian or African or Black in you, because that is what makes up, at least Puerto Rican people, because that's where I am. That is what makes you up. You're not just one person, you're from multiple different backgrounds. And I think a lot of the time it has to do with the fact that you'd be surprised how much self-hate there are within our own communities. How many people will take to their grave that they are not minorities, that they are not Indian or Black, or that they are not they're I'm Puerto Rican, I'm this, and that's all I am, or I'm white, or it's so easy to kind of forget sometimes where you come from.
Lots of Puerto Ricans, the ruling class. Look, you look at the ruling class of any country in Latin America. Almost all of the presidents going back, for the past 200 years or whatever the case is. Look at the Congress and in the Senate, and look at who's holding the money, right? And actually, like the richest, what is it, like the 9 families in Haiti, man, they all happen to have light skin. Like the lightest skin families in Haiti are the ones that's holding 90% of the wealth in Haiti. What do you think about it in your head? Like the fact that you're a minority and you look white and you are white. A big part of your DNA is white.
Yeah, I guess I've really struggled with that my whole life, honestly, because I know that like I am really white. I'm very pale. And so I never knew. I've always been really confused if like I am a minority because most people just assume I'm white.
So if there was a scholarship at Penn State for Latina women, okay, Gigi's a Latina woman, and she's going to apply for that scholarship. Like, how do you feel about that?
The first thought in my head is not like, well, she shouldn't because she looks that way, you know, because either way, yes, she may be treated differently because she looks white, and maybe she won't stand some things that I have to stand, like if someone sees me and is racist automatically, and she has like people wait to be racist with her when people wait for her to say where she's from because she automatically doesn't look as if she's Latina.
Uh-huh.
But for me, if I see her, that's not the first thing that I'm going to say. That's not what I'm going to be thinking of. I'm not going to be thinking about that because I know that, like, if we say we're a minority, it's because we struggle with other things that is not just appearance. Like, it's like coming here it's hard, and you may look very white and everything, but I know you've struggled with some things either way that I struggle as well because you're Latina.
A white a white woman would say, well, what do you mean, Carolina? Gigi struggles with things because she's Latina. Like, I struggle with shit too. You know what I mean? Like, I struggle with a lot. Like, what do you mean? Like, she struggles with what? I struggle with things. Like, what is it about her struggle is more different than my struggle?
My mom is like very white. She's Puerto Rican, and I guess no one really knows that she's Puerto Rican until she like starts talking. But I don't know, like when I was growing up, even though she's like extremely white, like she might be a little bit whiter than Gigi, they always think that she was our nanny. And like, I guess like
You mean because of her accent, because of her dialect?
Yeah, because of her accent. And they always think like her friends were her, like their kids' nannies too and stuff like that, coming from like having like a mixed family. But like, it's like interesting because even though she's white, she's still getting like put into that category.
How do you manage with all these other white people who have the same minority status as you do?
Honestly, I'd have to come in from the culture part. If they're part of the culture, they're family to me. They're Latino, they're Hispanic, whatever they want to label themselves. And through a different culture than the U.S., I think that adds a little bit of struggle trying to reconcile the American ideals and ideas to another culture. So I think that's part of where the struggle comes from.
Definitely not white, but my sister, because she does look white and she does have a white skin tone, I think something she struggles with a lot is the fact that people can make her feel a lot of the time like she's not really Latina. Like she has to like engage in kind of like white stereotypical like actions or talk in a certain way or act in a certain way because she doesn't look like the stereotypical like tan brown Latina skin or the this or the that. And I feel like that's something that light skinned Hispanic people have to deal with all the time.
So I moved to the US literally like 4 years ago. Like I was like born and raised in Puerto Rico. I lived there most of my life. So my identity crisis really started when I moved here because I felt like I was having a really hard time fitting into like either group because I was like, the Hispanics were like, oh, you're white. And I was like, no, I'm Hispanic. And then when I'd like go to white people, they're like, oh, you're Hispanic. And I'd be like, I'm so white. I don't know.
So Ashley, so as someone who is Latin American, Caribbean, Afro-Caribbean, how does this play out because Kami kind of said it a little bit, but how's it play out in the community?
Okay. In terms of skin color, so very similar to what I think a few of you guys said. In Haiti, we have a variety of different skin colors. My mom is like the lightest skin tone, the palest skin tone you can get, to to the darkest skin tones you could find. Is very diverse in that sense, and just in that, which is why you can be Hispanic, you can be really anybody. If you have a little bit of black in you, it doesn't really matter. Like if you go to Haiti,
Yeah.
they will just welcome you with open arms because they're like,
Yeah.
if you have a little bit of black in you, it's like you're
Yeah.
family, you're one of us.
I've never felt like obviously I think of myself as a minority here in the States, but like Gigi and Kaomi said, like Puerto Rico is so diverse that and I lived there too, so I've never felt like an outsider sort of.
People have this idea that like in North America, in the United States, we created this sort of white category that's just like whiteness, and you're in that, and if you're in that, it's one thing. But when you're from Latin America, it's so incredibly complex, and you're not just white, or you're not just black, or you're not just brown or mestizo or whatever. You're juggling all of these other factors and forces that are in play.